Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow. And on today's episode, we commence our summer rebuilds with Manchester United. How many players would we actually keep in this squad? What are their areas for improvement? And do we have any reason to be hopeful about the Red Devils next season? That's all on today's episode of the Transfer Flow. So we're back for another Monday edition of the Transfer Flow, and I'm joined by Ted Knutson. It's good to see you, Ted.
What are their areas for improvement? Is what Patrick said in the intro for Manchester United. I'm just like, yeah, all seem good. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like, look, we all were unfair to David Moyes, I think is the answer here. David Moyes correctly diagnosed the problem 12 years ago, that they do need to get better in every area on the pitch. But look, I mean, obviously it's great for us that United continue to be crap. They're like a never-ending kind of content hose. But fundamentally, the team should be better than this. We don't. There's always money going out via the Glazer leak, but there is money at this club. There are some young players we like at this club, and so we thought it would be good to kick off with the team that really should have much more ability to rocket up the table than some of the others. You know, they have some money there. They have some assets they can sell. They've just got to do something, Ted. I mean, that's fundamentally the issue here. For a long time, it felt like we were saying with Man United, pick any strategy and put
and
your
stick with it.
resources into it, and it'll be fine. And somehow they managed to mess up this very simple mandate.
Because they have so many resources. So this is the thing that often gets lost, right? We're looking at the team that are currently 14th in the Premier League table with 4 games left to play. It is the end of April, and Manchester United are guaranteed not to finish in the top half of the table, like guaranteed, and they could still finish 17th. I mean, they might not, but they could. Like, there's only 3 points separating them from 17th, which is the cusp of relegation. It has been a fascinating journey for someone who's not a Manchester United fan, who watched Arsenal lose so many times in so many matches where we felt like we outplayed Manchester United. And then we were hit in the last 15 minutes by these awesome counterattacks and Fergie time and what was at that time the best run and best coached team in the world. And it was that way for a very long time. And Manchester United fans were so incredibly insufferable for the longest period of time. It has also been lovely to see, Gary Neville suffer with his team being terrible for a very long period of time. It's nice because, Neville used to be a very talented commentator, and now it seems like he's overscheduled himself to the point that he doesn't really know that much about what's going on, and he has to watch Carragher next to him have one of the best periods of I guess 8 years that Liverpool have ever had, including their 20th title that they just took this last weekend. So we're coming at this from the perspective of professionals, though. We're not here to snark about how enjoyable it has been for Manchester United to be bad. We are telling you that it is true, but our job is to help rebuild them into something that is a cohesive, competitive entity. And one of the challenges that we have is this team is so fucking bad with so few resources that it's an impossible job for anybody, including Kim and myself.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we kind of don't really know how much money they have. And I'd just like to, say Ted is approaching this from the point of view of a professional. I'm approaching this from the point of view of a professional YouTuber. So I'm going to laugh like a good deal more. But it is really hard to know how much money there is. And Kim's spreadsheet, which showed all the players on the books and how much they've got left to pay off on these players, is one of the most depressing documents I've ever looked at, because you're looking at over 30 mil on Mason Mount still to go, over 30 mil on Anthony, who has had a good loan and who still will not recoup it, over 30 mil on Højlund, who it sounds like they are desperate to send back to Italy this summer. So they're behind the 8 ball big time. And I don't know, maybe it's worth just dealing with the positive stuff, because that we can get through that fairly quickly. They do have a bunch of good young to peak age players. We like Garnacho. Mainu looks promising and is very, very young. Amad Diallo looked excellent in the small portion of the season he played. I think we like Dorgu. Yoro, they overpaid for, but Yoro is a young centre-back and he's there now. De Ligt has been good. After that, we sort of get into Mazraoui, Martinez, these are players we like, but we don't know how much a part of the long-term project they're going to be, especially Martinez, who feels like he's a theoretical player at this point more than an actual contributor for Manchester United, given that they've had to use Johnny Evans more recently. 2 or 3 of these players at least have a really good chance of being excellent. And yet some of these guys are being mooted as potential sales this summer because the money situation is so bad.
I find it hard to believe in a time period where Manchester United are looking at stuff and saying the money situation is bad, and Chelsea are like, we have infinite money, like we're not worried about PSR. Aston Villa also are able to spend like large amounts of money. I think that this is mostly an excuse for the ownership of Manchester United not to spend much money. I'm sure that they could create interesting accounting ways of drumming up money as necessary. Like, there's always a women's team to sell. There's always training grounds to offload. Like, there are ways to fund this that, you can get through the army of lawyers and accountants that are necessary to do so. I don't really care because it's not my team. I'm just saying that, like, it feels functionally that this is stupid. Now, the other side of this, however, is that when Manchester United have made mistakes, they have made dramatic mistakes. They have made epic fuck ups. And it's not just like once or twice. They have done it over and over and over again. And the previous regime, I just want to put this into context. While Liverpool may make an occasional mistake and like the salary on the books is like, 5 to 7 million. Like, when Manchester United make a wage mistake, it has been a 10 to sometimes 20 million pound a year mistake. Like the Casemiro one is massive. Marcus Rashford's wages are massive. Harry Maguire is like 10 million a year on the books. Like Bruno Fernandes is enormous. Anthony, we believe, got paid an epic fuck ton of money for being terrible, like genuinely terrible as a Premier League player. He's not been awful in Spain, but he's also not been particularly good, certainly not worthy of the fee that was paid. And so they have backed themselves into a situation where their wages are so large while being so bad that they are desperate for these players to move anywhere and recoup some of the money. Jadon Sancho isn't even on this list, and he's one of the players that they're like, oh yeah, we got to get rid of him. Lindelof is another one. Like, these are all pretty big wages and pretty big fees that were paid on these players, and they're just waiting for them to cycle out. Like, Mason Mount was an obvious terrible buy. And the people that are there now are not the people that fuck these things up. They're just the people that are responsible for cleaning these things up. Last year, in our transfer analysis, when we did this information, we said this is a multi-year project, probably 3 years that it's going to take to rebuild United and get them back to like the cusp, even with their resources. That now looks like it might have been conservative. It might be 3 years from now because there's so much bad in there. They also haven't had much injury luck for whatever reason. Lenny Yoro, it would have been nice for him to have like at least a good half season of time to be able to play there and get comfortable. There's just so much that has gone wrong, and you can escape that via 2 things, because they have this revenue generating engine that is huge, and they're still a huge team by world standards. So they can either inject new money into it, which I think they can find ways if they want to, but they don't really seem to want to, or they can wait and take their medicine. And right now they're taking all the medicine. There's like no sugar at all. It's all medicine.
And I do think that actually this is an area where I've been quite impressed by Amorim. I haven't been impressed by basically anything on the pitch, but I do think that at least in his conversations with the press, he's been really above board about all this. He said, this sucks. This is going to hurt. This is going to hurt for a long time. This is going to take a long time. And you've got to understand that what you're seeing on the pitch doesn't look good. And it's not going to look good for a while. And I think good. Yes. Lower expectations. Lower them beyond the surface of the planet. Lower them as far as they can go. Because United fans need to understand that if they want to flip this power dynamic that they have with Liverpool, again, back to the way it was, 15, 20 years ago, it might take another 15, 20 years. I mean, it could take a shorter period of time if they get a few things right. But like you say, some of these contracts are so heavy and so long that we are looking at a 3 or 4 year horizon just before they're out from under those. So one thing I would like to say, because we're going to go on and suggest some players for what we think are their key areas of need, which of course are all areas. What I've tried to look at here is problem-solving players. So I do think with Manchester United, what they've had for a long time is this idea that we will get the perfect guy. He will fill this hole perfectly and it will solve all our problems. And I do get that appeal, especially when you're a really good team, like when Liverpool did it, with Van Dijk and Alisson famously. But United, they can't afford to have a bunch of guys who need a very specific role built for them. They've got a load of kids, they've got a load of injury issues. So I think they need people who can fill a bunch of differently shaped holes. And I'm not saying these have to be like utility players exactly, but they shouldn't go for super specialized guys. I think they need a few good all-rounders. I think that would do wonders for this team, especially in midfield, where it feels like you just don't have a whole player. You've got one guy who can run, but he can't pass. You've got a guy who can pass, but his heart doesn't work. You've got, Bruno Fernandes who just like does whatever he wants. It doesn't feel like you've got one entire human player. And I think that they should
Did
target
you just describe Christian
guys
Eriksen as the Tin Man? Is he the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz? Yeah. Okay.
I mean, look, Christian, the thing is, right, he at least has a brain. If he's the Tin Man, then everybody else is the Scarecrow on this team, right? Because nobody else seems to have any idea of what to do in possession at all. And I love Bruno Fernandes' hero ball as much as anybody, but still.
Yeah, or it's like they lack athleticism, which most of the Premier League does not. Like one of the things that the Premier League has right now in spades is athleticism. And my son and I were talking about it over the weekend about like how many physical specimens Liverpool have. And it's been quite interesting to watch the Champions League progression because like the first time around that PSG played Arsenal, like Arsenal were so much more physical than PSG. And it was kind of alarming in a way because it used to be Arsenal that got taken to the cleaners like that. Then PSG upgraded and Enrique used that first game against Arsenal to be like, look, this is not the style that we can play. We cannot bully players off the ball. We have to be overwhelmingly skilled and we have to move. We have to use our brains. We have to use the ball. And they did that against Liverpool and they were outrageously good against it. There are many different ways that you can win at football. But what you can't do is you can't be slow and not know how to move the ball. Like you can't do that. That's very, very bad. And unfortunately, that is the position that a lot of Manchester United found themselves in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so athleticism, completely agree. Like, there's just very little pace in this team across the board. Very little strength across the board. Not that much technical ability in lots of positions. Not that much brain among a bunch of players. Now, like I say, Garnacho and Diallo, really excited about them. These guys are intense. They're both pests. They're not going to physically dominate you, but they can go and go and go again. Garnacho gets shots from wide. Diallo looks like a really good presser and a bit of a kind of dual threat. This is good stuff. Like that this is positive. Shall we start with centre forward though? Because this is an area that is United have sunk over £100 million into this area over the last couple of years. They've got two players there now who they seem to hate. They're linked with every striker on the market right now. So we've talked about Darwin Nunez, which would obviously be the most enjoyable striker signing they could make. But what do they need? They need shots. They need physical presence. They want a good mover. I guess we're looking at players ideally who are kind of like 19 to 24. Like that's the kind of range we want. They've also been linked to Victor Osimhen, who is a little bit older than that, but the price now seems to be coming down to 40 to 50 million. And look, is it necessarily the best long-term idea? No. Would Osimhen make them quite a lot better now? Yeah, I kind of want to see it.
Here's the thing. Like, so if you had to minimize, if you had to like take everything off the board and you went with a very, very thin squad, which United may end up having next year if they cycle some of these players out, because like there just is not a lot of depth. So say that you don't have Ahmad and Garnacho, like who are their backups, right? Like assuming that Rashford's gone anywhere else, assuming that Sancho is somebody else's problem at some point, you've got nothing behind him. Like there's just nothing at all. But assume that we're just dealing with the starting 11 and no concept of squad building whatsoever here. I think that Darwin and someone to pass to Darwin are like the two most interesting spots to start, right?
Sure.
Like, let's just ramp up the shot volume. The problem that we've said with Xerxes and Højlund is that combined, they still average fewer shots than an elite center forward combined, which is so absurd. But assume that you take Darwin and Garnacho and they're getting 8 shots between them a game. That's good fun for everybody, as long as they can get distribution, right? So yeah, let's just ramp up the pace, ramp up the distribution. The guys at the back are going to have to handle things. That's fine. Like, that is great drunken football. And to some extent, that's the plan that it was for like Liverpool's last 2 seasons under Klopp. Let's get some elite players. Let's play some drunken football. Let's generate a lot of shots. We're going to have a lot of pace. We're not always going to control the game. Let's see how it goes. Now, I don't think Amorim has that in his bag of tricks. But as somebody who was like trying to rebuild in like the minimum time to create something at least functionally a top half football team, I think that that's kind of interesting, because you've got some elite elements of the squad. You can focus on set pieces off of that as well, because some of these things are going to get blocked. You're going to get corners off of it. That at least is like some type of plan that lets it work. Now, Luke Shaw's never going to play really any amount of minutes. We just don't believe that that's going to happen. Lissandro's been on another ACL problem, so like his injuries, who knows? This is where you run into the squad problems. Like, there's no depth in this team, and there's no money to create depth for this team. So what we saw in the earlier transfer windows was Manchester United got thrifty. And in the newsletter today, I described it as they've been thrifting off Facebook Marketplace, which anybody who's been on Facebook Marketplace knows that there's always going to be some ridiculous argument. Like, in fact, Facebook Marketplace chat logs are some stupid element of like universal memeing that creates these amazing instances of, oh, I've dealt with the dumbest people in humanity. Now, Manchester United are trying to cobble together a squad from cheap elements of the rest of Europe, because they can't shop at premiums anymore. They're taking cast-offs, they're taking rebuild projects, they're taking something that unfortunately looks like a Nintendo 64 in mint condition, but is actually only the plastic case outside. And that's what they're trying to build here. And I wish them the best of luck. The way that you would do it in the modern age is to get the best analytics group possible. And you take 1% of that whole budget that you've got, or maybe even 0.5%, and you invest it in getting much smarter in all the players you recruit from. And maybe then you can actually find some of those players. I don't think they've necessarily done that. I think they're still in flux, even this period of time after that. Ashworth's gone. Who the fuck knows actually what's going on there? And for the neutral, that's amazing. And for the people that are Manchester United fans, I take up watching cricket and rugby for a year or 3, because it doesn't look like it's going to get better fast. It just doesn't.
So, in case you're wondering why we've teleported into different locations, I'm in a different outfit, we're on a different day, it's because my internet crapped out, so we've had to come back on a Tuesday. But on the plus side, it means that we've been allowing things to percolate for an extra 24 hours. And Ted, you were saying something off air. Obviously you were saying before that they need to invest more in their analytics department. And in the long run, clearly that's something they need to do. They need to just build a competent operation. There's no reason that Manchester United should not have a world-class operation, really, except for the fact that nobody at Manchester United seems to want to do it or have the requisite knowledge to put one into effect. But you were also saying that when it comes to building the team, there are 2 broad approaches they could go for, right?
Yeah, so when you get to where you're at with United, you have a couple of different potential approaches. And one of the hardest things for United over the years is just discipline, right? There's like no discipline from anybody. Yeah. And discipline is usually about, hardcore price control, which they seem to have on the spending side. So like, Ratcliffe has fired tons of people, and not to say that like some of those people probably didn't need to churn. Like, people who are survivors will kill your sporting business, because like they're just trying to hold on to their job. They're not trying to like be awesome at competing. Like, your job is like to create awesome teams and like create this competitive monster. And in many cases, you have to kill your darlings in order to do that. And that's true on the sporting side, where like if you let older players linger around and have these big contracts, like they eventually kill your production. If you have people who are not great at their jobs, but manage to hang on to things and, manage to politically fence their way, through many, many different regimes, but they're not great at actually executing to create the competitive thing, then they also cause problems. So there's that side of it. So when you get to United as a sporting entity, they are old and they have all of these albatross contracts that we've been talking about that have big issues. At this point, you kind of have 2 paths that I think you can take. One is kind of the near term one. So what can we get kind of the most bang for our buck in terms of sporting output. And that's the thing that I refer to as the drunken uncle rebuild, which is basically, as we talked about a little earlier, you get Darwin Nunez up top, or some of this very high shot generation up top. You get somebody to pass to him in the middle that is also a decent sort of DM. You have the two young players out wide in Ahmad and Garnacho, who also has a high shot volume.
Yeah.
And you just kind of play high tempo. Let's see what happens in the game. Let's see if, our defense can hang on. Let's see if Onana can handle potentially quite a few breakaway shots. That's one avenue. And I think that's a really fun, entertaining avenue. It will be high stress for United people, and it could end up like Spurs this year.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is, Spurs this year are not worse than United are this year. So it's not even like a negative outcome for them. That's one path. The other path on this rebuild is something that requires extreme discipline, both in the prices you're paying for players and the fact that you're going to have to wait a few years. But the problem with that United have right now is that squad is so barren in depth.
Yeah.
You might have like sort of 5-6 pretty good players. You might have like another few that are okay. And there's just like nothing. Or there's guys you want gone, like actively want gone. And the way to rebuild that is you have to restock the cupboard effectively. This is, mostly United's tank year. If you looked at it in terms of American sport, where like you able to go down, they don't have any relegation. You stock up young players, then you wait for them to mature together. United need to do that anyway, because they just do not have the depth of talent. So what they need to do is probably take a bunch of 10 to 30 million buys over the course of the next 2 years. Players ages 20 to 22. You don't want somebody that's super young that costs you 56, 60 million, because you don't know how they're going to work out. Like, unless they're already good, it's very challenging. So I think that those are like really two interesting. And maybe you do the first one this year, and then you do the other one over the next couple of years as these other players are cycling off and you're sort of rebuilding your budget effectiveness off of it. Otherwise, like, I don't think there's a clear plan that lets you dig out of this. And the fact that United have such a dearth of talent and backup talent, especially, is just going to cause them problems for ages.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the teams that are much better than Manchester United, you do see those teams getting value out of players who do not knock your socks off, right? Don't get me wrong, teams like Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea have also benefited a lot from having problems solved by their academies. Though Manchester United do currently have a winger and a central midfielder, and even a left back, left wing back, who are academy graduates who look like being useful for them. It does just feel like for a long time, the sort of glamour signings, the United fixation on glamour, on signings that their fans will like, has prevented them just being better than they are. And yeah, what you were saying before about a kind of high variance approach, like when you're finishing 14th or 15th in the table, like what have you got to lose at this stage?
Those glamour sightings turned into Crapticos as opposed to Galacticos.
Oh, good
and
one.
That's what you see up in Manchester. They just like so much shit that they have managed to put into the system up there that, it fits in with the stadium, I guess. It's needed to have a long-term rebuild as well. It's basically falling down around its ears. We've seen times where the rain comes and it's literally leaking through the roof on the fans.
Yeah. And the food
Everything
is like
about that place.
Diseased. The food's killing everybody. So it's probably good that they stopped serving food to the staff, I guess. But it was interesting what you were saying before. Look, I don't have any relationships in the game, so it's kind of funny for me to imagine that the chaos at Manchester United over the last 10, 15 years has ended up selecting for cockroaches instead of ants behind the scenes. There are these people who can survive themselves, but they can't really collaborate. Okay, well, I really like this because I think also that you can... It's not like the former approach, the DM to striker pipeline thing completely precludes doing the other thing as well. Like, you need to just bring in some cheaper, younger, more versatile players as it is. But if we're going to prioritize those signings and we're looking at a striker, where do we go? Because there's, as we said before, there have been rumours about Victor Osimhen. There are also rumours about Liam Delap. They really like Liam Delap. And there's a lot of talk about him. But just from a shot volume point of view...
Gyokeres is the other one.
Sure,
right? So
that'd be fun.
is the third that slots in. It's a natural connection. Like, his agent is always trying to sell him. And
sure.
He's always trying to get more wages and another fee. Of the three of those, like it really is like a cost value equation. And I would actually be more interested in the midfield section. I would want to spend more on a midfielder if I had to. Like, I remember I was shopping for wine in France in 2005. I'm in Paris. I'm like, all right, I'm going to spend 100 euros on 2 bottles of wine because we've got this little wine party. Like, we've been covering Magic the Gathering, whatever. And I walked into a Parisian wine shop and someone took pity on me and actually spoke to me without being entirely rude. And I said, hey, this is my budget. I would like to get, some sort of like white or dessert wine and then a red wine. And they're like, well, you could get any number of things, but like you don't want to waste your money and you don't have enough money to get a truly nice red wine. And so what you need to do is you need to spend like, something on a pretty good red wine, but you can get a wonderful dessert wine, something that's like truly spectacular. So do this. And they took all of my money and they were right. It was a good piece of advice.
Sure.
If I had to choose where I wanted to split that budget, I would probably go for more of the discount striker while wanting things to come available in the market. And you also, again, have to be so careful about how much you're spending on wages. United's wage spend is so fucking insane compared to everybody else out there. So maybe you want to put big packets in there that say, if we're successful, if we get back to the Europa League, if we get back to the Champions League, then you're going to get like, a 40% bonus on your pay.
Sure.
Right? Because that's like a big deal. And that's heavily incentivized to get them in the way that they want to go. But you need to be really careful about those bases. And so someone like Gyokeres is looking at that versus somewhere else, even like around Europe, if they get sensible about how they spend money, like Osimhen and Gyokeres, I don't know if like you fit them into that budget because they really need to have that reset of where all the levels are, especially given that like TV revenues have flattened out too. So like there's just no uptick anymore and you don't have any European money coming through. I don't have a strong choice between the two kind of premier strikers if they went that way. Like I think they both have like interesting sort of strengths. Osimhen's a little younger. We don't know what his real baseline is now. Like one of the things that concerned me last summer was his baselines had flattened out. And in fact, we'd actually seen his performance level come down a little bit year over year. And you're like, that's usually a warning sign that you want to be really careful about spending too much money, especially in like a 5-year wage packet that you would give him. Gyokeres doesn't have that, but he wasn't awesome in the championship. And so you're like, there's enough things going on here. I'm kind of concerned. Weirdly enough, Liam Delap, despite the fact that he doesn't generate a ton of shots, like he does have at least good trending. You know how hard he works. You know that he's going to cost you less. So if you're like risk reward in there, you got to be a little careful about it. And this is why I was saying I would prefer to spend more money on the midfield and then take the discounted striker option. It's not really any different than they have currently.
Okay. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it would be interesting. Obviously, someone like Jonathan David has been linked to them as well this summer. Jonathan David has his weaknesses, but he's free and he's quite two-footed and he could play behind the striker as well. There's also someone like Mikautadze, at Lyon. Like, I don't know if there are bargains to be had out of Lyon, but that guy's a big shot volume guy. He's pretty mobile. He'd be an interesting option for them too.
I think it's much deeper than the rumors say. And this is where you really want to be sort of fishing, right? One of the ways that you get successful bids in football is you need to do price asks on everything. And in fact, you want to be connected to maybe a couple of other like lesser tier clubs. This is where like being a network connected sporting director is actually kind of useful, even though like we've kind of overbaked them for a long time. Like the Manchester United price is going to look like this. But if you've got a couple of friends that you're able to like, say, hey, check in on this price, check in with the agent, whatever, that are not directly connected to you. So they don't always know that you're sharing information. It gives you a much more robust volume of information. And when somebody thinks that there's a bidding war, like then they tend to over ask the bids, and United have been terrible about this for such a long period of time.
Sure.
But the reality is you get better information. You do lots of price asks all the time. It becomes a normal part of your business process. And then you find out that, oh, okay, this is approximately what the striker market looks like. And these are the ones that we actually kind of love, but we don't want to spend 60. We don't want to spend 65. We want to spend 40 plus some clauses. And that then, drums up interest. And then if you can get real baseline prices from other places, especially knowing like what they would go if they went in Europe, that's really valuable too. Because we know that there's basically a 2x price premium on players going to the Premier League versus going somewhere else in Europe. And so if you're pretty sure that you're the only ones that are in for this player on the Premier League, like you might even be able to get that down to like 1.5x. And it's just, it's a challenging job. It takes real smarts about how the market works. But if you do it right, you can create long-term value, which is what smart places like Liverpool have done over the last 10, 12 years.
Okay, so okay, this is going to take some some expertise, which we're fairly certain United don't have. To get into specifics, just because I think that people would like to hear you talk about them, I would really like to hear you talk about Liam Delap. He's an interesting physical prospect.
Absolutely, physical prospect, slam dunk. Came out of the Manchester City academy. Obviously, has that DNA of his father, although he's a much more robust dude than his dad.
Sure.
Physical elements look all quite strong. Like he is very strong. Some people compared him to, his build is like a Chris Wood, but I think he's probably a better mover than Chris Wood. I'm not sure he's as good with his head. His work rate's been exceptional. And he's been playing for Kieran McKenna as well, which I think is like probably a pretty good 1-year coach to be under. So if we think that behind the scenes, like things look good, physically things are quite solid as well, then the question is like, what does the skill set look like? And I think that is the difficulty in evaluating him at Ipswich. Like you see how he matches up physically with center backs in the Premier League, but you don't see what he looks like with real talent around him. And maybe you can go into kind of the youth ranks and see like how he played in those areas. But, you don't think you're getting like the finished product right now. You think that you're getting somebody that is at least a backup, which is sort of what that price is. 30 million for someone who's at least a backup is not bad. It's less than they paid for Xerxes, is a lot less than they paid for Højlund.
Yeah.
And so you're constraining your cost and saying, this was what we think his floor is. But we think his ceiling could be much better. We think his ceiling could be, he's definitely as good physically as anybody, as almost everybody that we see in the Premier League. Like he's not a Haaland. That's fine.
Sure.
So that's the good part. Now, shot volume is like a slight concern. We don't know if that's a talent problem. And then his ability to create for teammates also is like not the full, I would love to have, a top tier Champions League player, but we're not paying 100 million for somebody that can pass, that can dribble, that can shoot. So this is the gap between those two sets of interests.
Yeah. And also, I mean, like, I guess that if we're doing the thing that you talked about before, where we're like, right, okay, we're just going to play a more high variance game. We're not going to have a huge amount of control. Then immediately that's great, because some stuff that other teams have to care about, you just simply don't,
Right.
So Delap has quite a lot of ball losses. He dribbles at quite a low percentage, and there are a ton of turnovers, but he gets fouled a lot. So you might say, oh, great, well, he's going to get us up the field, he's going to drag us up the pitch, and we'll get some set pieces. And we don't really care so much that he's not maybe going to be a plus possession player for us. That does give you a kind of value edge in the market, right?
Yeah, and we think that Bruno's still pretty good at the set pieces that he takes, and like if we can make that another anchor, like he's a big, tall, strong guy.
Sure.
De Ligt also, I think, was actually quite good at set pieces back at Ajax, and so you're like, okay, can we have some extra weapons that will help us grind out, get that 1-0 that we need to have, so that we can play like a press and counter game. Like that's a pretty valuable space to be. The whole thing about United is, who is executing this plan? What is the plan in the first place? And how do we not look at just next season, but how do we look at the 3-year and the 5-year to dig out of all of the shit that you have to dig out of? Because it has been mismanaged since Ferguson left. And even in the last 2 years that Fergie was there, you would say that their squad building was pretty shit. And he was doing well above the odds versus, the late buys that they had brought into that group. So, it's not a quick fix. We've been saying it's not a quick fix for a long time. Nobody wants to hear that. But the reality is, if you want to get to the other side of it, you need somebody very strong-willed that is smart to be able to see all of the moving parts here, to have real discipline, and to dig out of this shit. And so don't make huge mistakes in the transfer market is step number one.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about Liverpool not doing anything last summer. I remember you were quite positive about Arsenal not really doing anything in January, because you were like, this betokens a level of discipline, an ability to stay on plan, which suggests that the people who are executing it know what the fuck they're doing. With
Liverpool
United,
have been remarkable
amazing.
at not responding to the fan energy, to the people complaining. Like, obviously, people complain a lot. They kind of had the tail end of Klopp, and That wasn't great, to be honest with you, in a lot of the signings. And then immediately they come back with a very disciplined head coach. They have not made huge mistakes. They had a deep, good squad, especially in attack. They managed to get their center backs through the season, which I think was actually pretty crucial for them because their center backs are such freaks like that.
Sure.
If the backup is quite a big difference between the two. You have to emulate that. And so few teams have that ability, but they are giving you the path and the blueprint to become a lot better. You just have to bear it for a few years. You have to bear Gary Neville bitching about things, behind the scenes. You have to bear all of the class of 92 complaining to their media friends about it. But the fact is, they've tried to do this the other way and they've failed in incredible ways. So how bad could it possibly be to actually have a bit of discipline and know that progress from 14th isn't going to be that difficult? We can do that.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a thing that I always loved. A guy called Lucas Tank, who used to write for Spielverlagerung. Like, he had his own website where he would do teams of the decade, like 2010 to 2020. And I think a really interesting writer about the game. And he talked about Messi. He said one of the things that makes Messi the greatest is that he does genius things sometimes, and in between, he always does the right thing. And I kind of feel this way about Liverpool's recruitment. It's like sometimes they just absolutely smash it out the park, but in between they don't do stupid, costly things that ruin their ability to make long-term gains.
So for those of you who are thinking that we're waffling on the striker, like, I think it more depends on what they bring in the midfield. Like, that I think is the more crucial thing. I would be cautious in spending, and that doesn't mean that they will be, but I would be cautious in spending up top. I would want to rebuild from the midfield and the back, and then sort of add your capstones into it. Even teams like Barcelona, like, you found a very late career Lewandowski, who used to be the third best player in the world for a decade. And they're managing to make that work this season in ways that were unexpected. So you don't have to just keep going after that type of stuff. You have to build real core strength and strength down the middle. Add the top tier talent later when you're not a 14th place team.
I mean, one caveat is that if they can get Darwin Nunez, they should do that. Anyone who can get Darwin Nunez this summer should do it for any price. I just want to see him like causing chaos. It's what everybody says they want as well. I constantly see people whining on Twitter about how football's become so formulaic and robotic and it's too structured. I tell you who is the one man antidote to this is Darwin Nunez. But okay, to give United,
John Duran would have been another option there too, right? Like,
that would have been really fun too.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, look, he's a bit older than you like. I don't like his injury record. But someone like Victor Boniface, for example, was reportedly available to Saudi clubs in January for 55 to 60 million. I assume it's going to be significantly less than that in the summer, and his wage ask is presumably going to be a lot lower than Osimhen's. Like, I mean, if they're trying to offload him, and it sounds like they are, maybe you can get him quite a bit cheaper. He would be super fun for this team. Massive shot volume, really, really dribbly. Like, obviously, you'd rather somebody a little bit younger, but I would like to see it. Let's talk about central midfielder, though, because I do think that having pointed out that their club is incompetent in, like, new dimensions, it would be nice to give Man United fans something to get excited about. So if you were looking for this central midfielder, you said they need to be defensively competent. It needs to be somebody, to me, who can receive the first pass from the goalkeeper with his back to, attacking players, and who can just turn and pass. Like, it feels like they don't have anyone there, or the fact that they used Eriksen so much was in desperation because he was the only guy who showed anything like the awareness to play this way.
I think that right now we do not know what the shape of the market looks like. And I'm being honest about that because, like, the problem with United is that you have to shop in kind of the middle tier. You need to shop for hidden gems. So one name that has been mentioned is Ederson out of Atalanta. Those of you who followed us for a while know that we do like Atalanta, but we also have some concerns that there are specific Gasperini elements around the tactical style there. In the same way that players from Bologna had weird ass Thiago Motta elements about them, and United ended up with exactly one of those players. So I like Ederson. I'm not 100% sure that he's like the full picture that they're looking for.
Yeah.
And I also I don't know what the transition is going to look like between United and otherwise. I think there are lots of pretty good Portuguese midfielders. And this is one area where Amorim would come in useful.
Yeah.
There are lots of Portuguese guys that kind of have this basic skill set. Lots of Spanish midfielders as well. If you think that there are ones that are durable enough to play in the Premier League that you can find that are like an 80th percentile guy for 25 to 30 million, you want to slot them in there now. If you find a guy that's a top tier profile like a Joao Neves and you want to play the game with the agents there, maybe you get that. That was what I thought they would do last year. I would have spent the money not on Lenny Yoro, but on Joao Neves and bring him in because I thought he was exactly the type of thing that they needed.
Yeah.
And they obviously got a different, PSG sort of funded the Neves deal by sending Ugarte on his way. So I really think that we haven't seen the extent of that market yet. I think that if I were doing this, I would have a list of 50 midfielders that we had then sort of stack ranked as this is how we think they are. This is what we think their floor is. This is what we think their ceiling is. Let's find all the pricing on these players, find out what they're thinking on the money. Because again, you're not trying to get this team from fourth to first. You're trying to get them from 14th to 8th or 14th to 7th. And that's a very different rebuild effort. So be very cautious in the money that you spend, and also be cautious in bringing in assholes. So that's going to take us into the next set of names that are on this list. And I would be just so careful about it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm intrigued to hear about that. I mean, I think that the good thing about being the sort of richest team in the second tier is that the players who are mooted for top moves and then those don't come about, you can probably pick them up at a bit of a discount. So like last summer, for example, it was, is Angelo Stiller going to go to Manchester City? Is he going to go to Barcelona? Now, is he going to go to Real Madrid? Well, he hasn't gone to any of those. And so,
I think he still moves this summer.
Yeah, and supposedly, I know he signed a contract extension till 2028, but supposedly it has like a 40 million-ish buyout. Well, he would be great for them. He's really defensively sound. He's a great passer. He's not 25 until this time next year. Like that to me is like the perfect kind of guy here because he's big as well.
I think he goes elsewhere. I think that he and his boxer's nose go elsewhere in Europe to a better team. And it's because he can have it, right? Like he knows that he's good enough. He can play for either Champions League club on the continent. Potentially he could play for one of the teams here. Like honestly, Arsenal need a player exactly like him, right? And if you had to choose between the two, like you can go play for, potential Premier League titles and Champions League over the next 3 years, or you can try and help United rebuild. Like that's a money question. So this is why you have to have a deep list. But yes, Angelo Stiller is an excellent choice. Go through all the retreads that were pretty good that seem to have fallen out. Who would have been fucking awesome? Like United have this history of buying Chelsea players that don't work out for them. Like Conor Gallagher would have been amazing.
That would have been really fun.
Yeah. And so what we're seeing is like there are players you can get for reasonable-ish prices if you put in the work. And this is what United's recruitment group has to be doing. And United's, I guess it's Barada that's rebuilding this. And, originally it was Dan Ashford. So we'll see what they end up with. The rumors, though, I think are much more agent-led than they are United-focused right now. And that hasn't been true in the past. I think when we've seen stuff before, it's been less so. Now, it could be that Cunha, makes sense for them because the agent is out there leading it and the media has really locked in on it. But I'm not touching Cunha at the release clause. I'm not touching him within 50% of that, really. Like I think he's a 40 to 45 player ish. I do not think he's 60 plus. Absolutely not.
And he's the same age as Osimhen. He's the same age as Boniface. Those guys have got.
You can get Osimhen for less than that price.
Yeah.
Because Napoli have to sell and they've already know that they've tanked his value. So like Napoli are like, look, we need to move this up front. We're going to try and sell early because otherwise we're going to end up exactly the same problem as last time. And we're going to lose another 50% off of his price. Well,
and as you were saying before, this is where we get into the problem of what does it mean to drop another dickhead in this changing room where, the older guys are about to age out, the younger guys are still kind of figuring out who they are, and the manager has no idea how much security he has. Like, it just seems like it just seems like a recipe for disaster if you do bring in somebody who you know is already causing problems at his current club.
So I think Cunha is one name on there that I'd be really concerned with. And, it might be that Amorim thinks that he's comfortable with it. But again, this is also, the length of the contract gives these guys the freedom to act how they want to, right? And you have to be really careful about those elements of it. The other one that I think can be challenging in dressing rooms, despite the fact that I think he's really talented as a passer and an attacking player, but we know behind the scenes that he has been a troublemaker, despite the fact that he's pretty young. And I very rarely bring up players on this. Like I usually it's the opposite way around. There were times when Jose was talking about different players as troublemakers, and I was like, there's absolutely no way. Like, these are young kids, they just want to play, like, they're being competitive, that's how it is. So Rayan Cherki, I think, we have a pretty long set of information that says that he can be a challenging personality. You don't want to add a bunch of challenging personalities to an overpaid old dressing room that does not have a history of winning. Like that, I think that is like really, really hard, because we've seen even the best players in the best dressing rooms, players will play for themselves. And it's really about getting the collective group to be able to overachieve that gets you success when the margins are very fine. So I would just be really careful about doing that too in the United space, because I don't think they can handle it. Like, they don't have the resiliency across that squad and as a current culture to be able to tolerate.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Cherki might be worth the risk for somebody, but he's not worth the risk for United. And yeah, Cunha, I agree, just like 1.5 times too much. But on the other hand, he's 2 times as many goals as his XG. So, maybe there's value to be had there in the multiplier.
Perfectly sustainable. Perfectly sustainable. He and Lionel Messi will be the only 2 players that are in that range, like, over the course of a number of years.
Yeah.
It's kind of a fun thing, because when you look at Cherki, you're like, he feels like a player that would end up at West Ham or Crystal Palace. And even, Palace have a recent history of being very good at recruitment, especially of attacking players. They don't overpay. They then sell them on for significant fees, like often doubling their money. Sometimes they keep them around. And, this year, Crystal Palace are sort of showing the payoff in that they're having a deep cup run. They had a tough early half of the year, but they've been really good in the second half of the year. So Cherki might be the type of, mercurial talent that ends there, or a place like Milan, or a place Inter. Either one. Inter, I think, is probably better able to handle him than AC Milan, who have had a very drunken season behind the scenes and in the performances too. Yeah, so I think you and I are both cautious about that. Now let's talk about another Crystal Palace player that would actually make sense if they got him for a reasonable fee.
Okay, so look, I mean, he's having a pretty tremendous season. This is Jean-Philippe Mateta. He's a player who a lot of us liked in Germany, and then had a bit of a rough transition, the first season and a half at Crystal Palace, and now is just absolutely motoring. And not just in front of goal. Like, you are seeing now all the stuff that he is capable of doing, the way he can drive on in wide areas. I've seen him throw William Saliba around in a couple of games this season, which not a lot of guys do. And he's got, at the risk of talking about his touch for a big guy, he does have a really silky finish about him. He's a very skillful player, and he's an aerial threat. I think he's a great all-round player. The question here is, what is the price versus his age? Because he's 27 now, I think. He'd be a great signing if he was available for a knockdown fee, but he's not going to be available for a knockdown fee.
That's the problem that United have. They have to shop much deeper in the market. But I think as a sort of creative versatility player up front, he's very exciting. It's the type of thing they used to have with Rashford minus in the air. Like, Rashford used to have a lot of creative versatility. You could play him out wide. You could play him through the middle. That was something that I think different head coaches valued, although his work ethic had suffered over the years, which is one of the things that you were seeing constantly briefed behind the scenes. And United have a long history of ruining talented attackers that are English attackers, honestly, both their value and their work work ethics seem to have suffered there. So it's not just Rashford. It was people like Jadon Sancho. There have been a history of them. Memphis Depay is another one where you're like, super talented, but just could not keep them kind of on the path that they needed to fit into that squad. So I think Mateta is really interesting. As you say, I don't think that United have the budget unless they whip out, a new 200 million transfer kitty, and then every team's going to be salivating about it. If they have that, I would keep it secret. I would keep it like totally behind, if you ended up spending 250 million in a window, that would be amazing. And you're like, no, there's no money. And then bam, there you go. Never ever brief about how much money you have to spend, because then the market's like, ooh, well, we can sell our players for a bit more here.
I would like to see them as well, just like take some gambles on really unknown guys, like low price guys, especially in the positions that are so hard to recruit in. If you find like a left-footed centre-back in like Argentina, then you should be taking risks on these kinds of guys. And I think, when we were talking about central midfielder before, it'd be nice for them to devote some big resources to a Stiller or I really like Nicolo Rovella at Lazio. That'd be interesting. But it would also be good to see them do the thing that we see. Man City have started buying people pretty early from Latin America. Clubs like Brighton obviously are more willing to take risks on players from, say, Japan or Belgium, and have relationships to loan these guys out. It feels like United could do with some of these small risks, especially in positions like striker, where the reward is potentially so high and the number of guys on the market who can actually play striker for Man United is so small.
So I've never said this before about a big team, but one of the things that's happened over the last kind of 10 years is that German teams send scouts over to watch all the English academies. Because what they realized was that there was a surplus of talent that couldn't fit into the big teams, that were too good to play in the championship. And so Germany started offering these guys like real paths, a bit like Brentford used to, actually. Brentford would say, hey, you're 21, 23, come here, you'll play with us for a couple of years, and then when we get a good wage or a good offer, we'll sell you on. And you're going to get playing time, you're going to get real coaching time, we're going to allow you to fit in with us, and we're not going to stunt your career. This type of thing that has been happening with young English players that go to Germany that are really talented and well-trained, this is literally what United should do over the next 2 to 3 years. Their academy isn't good enough right now. Their academy is not the same caliber as City, as Chelsea had been in recent years. We don't know what Chelsea Academy looks like now because the people that ran it are gone. The Hale end is at the moment. But what they should do is they should be like, hey, we actually have playing time. We have playing time in the Manchester United squad. So what we want to do is either now or over the next couple of years, we're going to buy all of the young English talent and say, we're going to give you a path. It will be here as of your second year, as long as you hit these performance goals when we loan you out to a good place, right? And what that good place is, like you have to have a plan to sell these kids on it. And in the meantime, we might even take some of you and give you our backup minutes because we don't have any backups. So we should spend 5, 10, 20 million all over the place just to build some depth of this squad and take those players that the English academies are jettisoning and bring them back into like a United fold. I think that actually is like a plan that people can get behind. Like it's almost like an imperative that you're like, ooh, I love this project. I'm excited about this project. You can sell some agents on the project as well. You can then put in escalator clauses for, if these guys are getting playing time, then we actually increase, not only their appearance fees, but we can increase their actual wage package. And I don't know, because otherwise, what are they going to do? They have so many needs that they need to have. And if they make it into Europe in 2 years' time, they're still going to have needs because they now have like more minutes that they have to fill. They have a pretty barren squad. Like, yes, you can spread the wage packages from some of these players across a couple of different players and obviously stop overpaying them in the future, but it's going to take that length of time to dig out.
That's a really good idea. Like, I mean, they've obviously we've seen them poach a couple of guys from Arsenal, right? Chido Obi is coming from Arsenal, Aiden Heavens come in from Arsenal, and in the past, if you were at a club like that and it didn't look like you had a path to the first team, then you were kind of jumping ship to a team like Crystal Palace. Now, if you can go to Manchester United and you might have a clear route to the first team, that's such an exciting prospect for these kids who will have grown up well, maybe some of them lesser. I guess I forget how young these kids are now. But certainly they'd have been coming of age, like as football fans, when United was still technically relevant.
Or their dads were. And so their
sure.
dads indoctrinated them to rooting for a terrible team for an extended period of time. I don't know what that's like as a parent.
Okay, so that's definitely something that they should be looking at. I mean, to be honest with you, when I look through this list of rumors that we've got here, there's not that much that excites me. Like Denzel Dumfries, too old. Dodo as a right wing back, I think he's a bit too old. He's 26, I think, as well, and he's also tiny. That guy. Van Hecke, don't buy from Brighton if you're United right now. Like it's just you don't have you don't have the minerals. You know, like Xavi Simons is an interesting name here, but like that is going to be a prince's ransom.
Why is he going to go to United as
exactly.
opposed to the other great places that he could play?
And also, look at the positions in the United squad that you actually like. Yeah. It's the only place in the United squad that you have players I like. It's the one spot where I'm like, great, Diallo and Garnacho behind the striker. Fine. Oh, okay, add Xavi Simons. Xavi Simons is great, but he's going to go somewhere else. So I don't know. There are players who I think would be interesting for them to consider. Like, I would love for them to go to like Monaco. There's a guy called Soungoutou Magassa who's a midfielder at Monaco. And Monaco is always a fun place to look for midfielders, I think. And he's like a 21-year-old, but only has about 40 appearances for them because they've been using Camara and somebody else using it, who I forget. But he's quite interesting. You know, like he's 6'2" and he can play DM and he can play centre back and he's a really good passer and he's super active defensively. And you're seeing some dribbling in him, which is a thing you kind of only really see in Ligue 1 midfielders, I think. It's like the only spot where you get guys. But you know, when you see a Ligue 1 midfielder and he's competing 1.5 dribbles a game at a really high success rate, you do think, okay, that's pretty rare skill set. Like that would be interesting. And at the very least, I look at these guys and think he might not be great, but I'll be shocked if he turns out to be less than useful. And that is the market United are in.
Yeah, like high floor guys is kind of what they need across the board, whether that's, you know, more athletic or zone moving. That's another thing that Palace kind of have stocked their team with. They've stocked it with a bunch of guys that can move you from zone to zone. They can beat that first initial man. They can receive in a way that allows them to sort of neutralize pressure. And the combination of that plus a quick burst means that you get into space and then you're able to play on the transition more and more, which is, Bournemouth is also another team that have done a good job at this. Brighton have very deep talent. They haven't necessarily had the injury like this year or necessarily the coaching structure to be able to succeed off of it. But you look all over that squad and you're like, they don't pay fortunes. Like this is a doable thing. Yeah. And Manchester United, it would also, you know, to be honest with you, obviously I don't think that they see it this way, but like it would benefit them to have a second team like, you know, Brighton do in Union, which, you know, whether that's true or not, like the Red Bull space, like City having 11 teams where occasionally they bring in, you know, somebody from Girona or elsewhere.
Yeah.
Even Chelsea with Strasbourg.
Yeah, I've got Diego Moreira in my notes, who's like been playing. He's played wing, he's played left back, he's had a great. Andre Santos obviously looks like he's going to drum up either some money for them or go into the squad. Like this is huge value.
Yeah, and it allows you to take more risks. You're able to actually diversify that set of risks across the space, and you also get more control over their development. I'm not saying that United should do this. They clearly do not have the sort of management capability to run one squad right now. You'd probably want them to be able to sort of prove themselves a little bit better first, but it would definitely ease the burden on just trying to hit home runs over and over again. And yeah, for United fans, if you're watching this, if you're other fans and enjoying it, that's great. But if you're a United fan, like just know that it's going to take you a little while. Like maybe you can get some Anthony money if you sell out as guys get off of their contracts. Like that's great. Like Luke Shaw's still there for another 2 years remaining. Like he's just never going to be healthy for you. Don't expect it. Mason Mount has God knows how much on his contract. Like, can he come back and be a decent sort of minutes filler? Potentially. Is he going to lead you back into the Champions League? Almost certainly not. He wasn't that player before. So yeah, just buckle in. It's going to be a bumpy couple years, and watch for signs of your organization being disciplined and making moves that don't look like, you know, big hit or huge bust moves. Like that, that's the careful level of responsibility that United have to have now. And yeah, I'm sorry that it's like this, because like as a fan, I feel like I've been in the like Arsenal were like not far off of going into this trajectory.
Oh, sure,
where they were overpaying for players. The wage package were stupid, and this was 5 years ago. But you like as a smart fan, you're like, this makes me sick. I hate everything that's going on here because it feels slightly corrupt, and it's also just like ruining the trajectory of this team. Then they chucked out the people that were doing that. They very carefully started replacing them with intelligence again, and working with a head coach that grew into his role as well. And you can end up on the other side, but it's still like it's a many years long rebuild process. And United at no point in the last 12 years have shown the ability to do this in a sensible way. So keep an eye out for them starting to get smarter. Last summer was not horrible.
No. And I think this is why, we often get a lot of criticism here in the comments when we say this guy's, 25, 26, 27, maybe you want to go younger, because people think that we're saying those guys are finished. But what we're actually saying is it's taken 5 years for Arsenal to be here under Arteta. If you sign your 25-year-old, then by the time the team's actually ready to compete for something, you're looking to replace that guy. United just need to think with a longer, the horizon needs to be further off for them. So, like, 23-year-olds, fine. 24-year-olds, maybe fine. But, like, then we're kind of getting into guys who are phasing out by the time you're actually getting going.
I think our rebuild plan looks like this. Inject fun into the team this year if you can. Like, because this is not a fun team. So inject some fun into the team this year if you can. Don't overspend. Don't fuck it up. And then restock the cupboard with guys that are close to coming into their peak space. So you're not looking at the 18 to 20-year-olds like Chelsea have been doing over and over again. You're kind of looking at the 20 to 23-year-olds where, in a few years' time, they're still just 26. So like they're not necessarily on the potential other side of that peak. So make it fun if you can. Definitely restock the cupboard. Look for a bunch of buys in like the 10 to 35 range. And then, just let it mature. I think that's the best way. But you've got to get some fun into it to bring the fans back around if you can.
Yeah, on the topic of fun, and also you mentioned Bournemouth before. It's just like, if you want to spend a load of money on a Premier League attacker, don't do it on Cunha. Do it for like Dongo Uatara or something, who is like just turned 23, has played striker, has played winger, has played wing back, has crazy defensive album. Like a guy like that who's like an athlete, who's skillful, who's a left-footed winger, who has played in multiple different systems, like who's a really hard-working defender. Like, just get someone like that. Make it enjoyable, because a couple of those players will go a long way. And I think that, not to always bring it back to Arsenal, but I do think they're an obvious comparison for Manchester United. And what made this last few years tolerable for Arsenal a lot of the time was when they brought in Martinelli from like the 4th division of Brazilian football, and he was super exciting and fun. And when Bukayo Saka came through the academy and like did actually connect the fans to the team again. I really think you can't underestimate that, because when you don't have results, you need something else. And United are probably not going to have results for a while.
If you're going to spend a bunch of money on an anchor, put it in your midfield. Don't put it up top.
Sure. All right. So is there anyone else you want to hit before we go? I mean, like, just I think that we've covered basically most things.
United just have so much need, and that is causing like a rebuild problem for anybody that's undertaking this job. Yeah, there's nothing you can do to avoid it. Be disciplined. Hope that they get somebody fun in over the summer, and enjoy the fact that they're there, and then enjoy. Eventually, you'll have a circus tent where you can watch the best young players in the world play again. But that's a few years away.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for listening or watching today. We've got a bunch more of these coming up. We've got the Liverpool one, the newly crowned Premier League champions who need to turn
I'm gonna get grumpy DMs on that one. The moment we do, like, I can just see people who either work for Liverpool or have worked for Liverpool being like, "Oh, you think that you're better than no, this is our content. Leave me alone. Do you send shitty emails to Kara like this? Leave me alone."
Tell them that I think I'm better than them. Like, I don't care. They're not going to message me.
It's true.
Just say it's my fault. It's like the same way that when I run into somebody with my wife and she's like, I don't remember what her husband is called. I was like, just blame me. Just tell her that, like, when we turn up to a party without a present, it's my fault. It's totally fine. I don't care.
Well, see, the problem is that occasionally we'll go out to lunch and Ian Graham will just happen to show up to lunch, and then you actually have to have that conversation.
Sure. Oh dear, the champagne problems. Thank you very much for listening, watching. We really do appreciate it. We've got a bunch more of these coming up. As I say, we've got Liverpool up next, and after that we've got Tottenham, which I think is a particularly interesting one. But let us know who else you'd like us to cover in the comments, and we will see you later in the week. Bye bye.
Champagne problems, caviar dreams. I was trying to say, I felt like I was channeling you while I was writing today. Like, it was very cathartic. I was able to release into this Manchester United set of stories.
It's always nice though when I read something and I think, like in the newsletter, and I think this is actually the conclusion that I arrived at independently, because the one positive part of my notes is I genuinely like Diallo and Garnacho, and that's it.
Yeah, they're pretty good. I think Dorgu might be all right. Yeah, it was a bit like the relationships episode where we didn't talk about notes at all, and then it's like, yeah, I really like this framework. And I really like the skills, and I was like, okay, well this is okay. Maybe we should disagree more. Talk about what idiots we are.
Okay, I mean, look, that's fine with me. Oh my god, I forgot that Johnny Evans is there. Okay, that's enough of that. This is
he got playing time. He got real playing time this year. It's not just that he's there.
Yeah, but he's the only one who has a brain. He's got no legs, but he's got a brain. He's Christian Eriksen, but in defense.
Yeah, 330 minutes for Johnny Evans, 95 big minutes for Luke Shaw out there. Victor Lindelof, 438. This was when Kim originally did the research, so there might be even more, but still.
Christ. Kill me.
I also like it when they throw in random goalkeepers just to see, if you throw a goalkeeper in for one game and he's a little bit nervous, what happens? That's always fun. Half of them shit the bed because they're slightly concerned about, being there for 1 week as opposed to being there all the time. I do have the same shirt on though. I took the shirt off yesterday
for continuity, of course. Yeah.
Continuity is what you're working on.
Goodness me. You've been in the UK too long, man. This is the problem now. You've got the same mental disorder as everyone in this country. Okay.